Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Happy Monday. How are you? How are you on this Monday? I am doing well. Um, like anybody, like Mondays are always hard to get back into the swing of things. Just giving a nice weekend. And again, I had a long weekend. Um, my youngest son's school had this event and it was beautiful. It was amazing. It turned out really well, and it got me thinking about just how much importance it is for inclusion, for belonging, for just a sense that you are a part of something. And I'm just so glad to be able to have been a participant and organizer of the event. And um, although it Y'all, I went right to sleep as soon as I got home after I did my live yesterday, but it has been good. And I am very much grateful for the event. For those that don't know me, my name is Tashina, and I'm an executive leadership and team coach for teams and their leaders. I help them collaborate better. I help heal from conflict and help teams get shit done without the drama. I would say that I'm a self professed team healer, and I love to heal teams from just all the pain and the drama and the things that they may have gone through so that they could come together and they collaborate better effectively and actually be a healthy team, be a healthy team. So, meetings, let's talk about meetings. Meetings are the norm for every team. It doesn't matter how big or how small your team is, your team will have a meeting. But here's what the data says: the data says that the average employee spends 11 hours a week in meetings. That is roughly 28% of their work week. And if you're in a larger organization that maybe has 1,000 or more employees, the number jumps to nearly 13 hours a week. So we're spending a lot of time in meetings. We are spending a lot of time talking. And in my personal opinion, not enough time taking action. But if your team is a team that's spending a quarter or more of its week in meetings, my question is always, are there some voices that's being squeezed out? Are there voices that are missing or not being allowed to have input or have an opinion? Because for me, meetings aren't just about what gets discussed, they are also about what gets heard. And when we overload our calendars without being intentional about who's going to participate, what voices we need, the same voices are going to dominate while the others are typically going to fade into the background. In systems, in the systems, and I've been talking about this for a number of days now, but in systems that truly value and center the voices that need to be centered, meeting time isn't just about the quantity, it's about quality, it's about inclusion, and it's about designing spaces where everyone has room to contribute, especially those who tend to be overshadowed in high media environments, because we want all the voices to be heard, okay? Especially for my introverted girlies or my introverted guys. We want your voice to be heard. So, on day 10, which is today, day 10 of 30 days of systems that make teams work, what I'm going to dive into is whose voices are missing on your team and getting you to notice that. We're going to talk about how to intentionally center more voices. So maybe you are a leader or maybe you're somebody on the team and you're like, I definitely want more people to be heard and I definitely want to hear other people. I just don't know how to do it. So we'll talk about that. And then what happens when everybody or every perspective that needs to be shared actually has space at the table to share that and actually has a seat at the table and is invited into these spaces. Okay. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's first talk about whose voice is missing. So when we talk about missing voices on team, I'm not just talking about who's quiet in meetings, because we can assume like, oh, this person is quiet, so we're missing their voice, or this person doesn't hardly speak, so we're missing this person. But it's not exactly just about who's silent. I am specifically talking about power. We've been talking about power. We talk about how power shows up. We talk about those orange organizations, those red organizations. I also talked about a lot about like how power shows up, how it gets either abused, misused, or how you can actually like work with power, because it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but we have to notice it, and not noticing it is where we get into some trouble. But we want to ask, who feels safe enough to speak and who actually gets heard when they do, and whose ideas actually get acted on. Now, I'm not saying, and I'm not a champion that everybody needs to get their opinion implemented. But what I am saying is, like, are the same people getting their things implemented? Are we not kind of iterating from one idea and kind of building upon it and making it better? Or are we just kind of saying, scratch that, we're not going to even worry about that? Those are the type of things that we're going to look at, and I want to just kind of like uncover so that you're able to see this in your team system at work. Because in most systems, it's not random whose voices get missing or go missing. It's something that is a pattern. And normally, typically, it's a person who's new or more junior. It's a person who falls into a historically marginalized background. It's an introvert who doesn't jump in fast or think out loud. I can relate to this one completely, because your girl, I'm not quick on my feet like that. Sometimes I just need time to digest, to think before I say something. And the person who doesn't have access. So this is the person who isn't even in the room at all where the decisions are getting made, but they are the person closest to the work. Typically, this is the pattern of individuals who aren't getting heard. And I'll tell you, there is some data that actually backs this up and says that this actually happened. So, most of you may know, or you might not know, there is a Women in the Workplace report by Lane and McKinsey. Every single year, they publish this report. And in 2024, they said, which is, I would say this has been the theme at least the past 5 years, is that women, especially women of color, are still being left out of key decisions, out of different opportunities, and the conversations that help to shape the direction of their organization. They're just being left out. And so, even when they're in the room, they're not always in the conversation. So, sometimes it's like, oh, we can't have you speak to that, or you can't listen in on this part. You could come in for this part, not that part. Or, after we're finished this discussion, can you just like see your way out? It might not be said that harshly, but we know that there is data that says like women of color and women are not being heard in different organizations. And so I want you to think about, like, if your organization, we talked about different type of archetypes of organizations. Sometimes you're a male dominant organization. So maybe you as a woman, they're not letting you speak. Or maybe you are an orange, or not even orange, maybe a red organization that's all about command and control and about fear and about, compliance. Your voice isn't necessary, right? And so these things may happen. And so I just want you to notice, when you're looking around in your meeting this week, I want you to say, is the new or the junior person not being heard? Is the historically marginalized person quiet? And not quiet as in like they're thinking, but quiet as in like they're being silenced. Okay. That's a better way to say it. They are being silenced. Or is it the introvert who just needs some time? And so you need to give them some tools to like share their opinions, even if it's not right away. I know personally some of the things that I was told, like, hey, I'm thinking, let me digest on this first for a minute. Can I get back to you in a second? Can I get back to you in 24 hours? Let me just think. I'm processing. Just saying that out loud so that you don't get overlooked. You don't, they don't talk over you, things like that. Or did we not invite somebody into this meeting who needs to be in this meeting, who has very crucial data or, things that we know that we need to know in order to make key decisions. So ask yourself that as you're going through your week. So why are these voices getting silent? That's what I want to know. I'm sure you want to know too. Why are the voices actually being silenced? Because there is a reason. On the surface, it's easy to assume that when someone's voice isn't heard is because they didn't speak up. Like they're not like I know like this topic really hits home for me because I remember being in corporate spaces and my voice wasn't heard, not because I didn't speak up, but because it wasn't safe for me to talk. It wasn't safe for me to share my opinions because my opinions would either get dismissed or it would be stolen later on as and taken as someone else's idea. And the psychological safety that I needed in order to speak up wasn't there. And so let's not assume that someone's voice isn't heard because they just didn't speak up. There may be things happening in the background or something internally that they're trying to navigate. You've probably heard the saying closed mouths don't get fed, right? I know you've heard this, especially if you're in the Black community. You've heard this closed mouths don't get fed. And sure, there is some truth to that, but it's not the full story. Because in most teams, it's not just about who speaks, it's about the system that will decide whether or not you can be heard. We are seeing this in our society where it's like our First Amendment right is like front and center because the system is deciding who wants to get heard. And let me tell you this, even though you may think, oh, this is just the government, the way the government operates, that stuff is trickling down to your organization. Trust and believe. Trust and believe. And if you think I'm lying, try me. Give me 30 days and come back and let's talk. Let's talk. Because nothing happens in a silo. Nothing. I talked about this yesterday when I talked about Ubuntu, and I talked about how, like, collectively, we are interdependent. We are connected. So whether or not you think that me being silenced doesn't impact you, what did they say about the Holocaust? First they came for me and I didn't speak up, and then, or first they came for a certain group of individuals and I didn't speak up, then they came for the next individuals and I didn't speak up, then it got to me and there was nobody to speak up for me. We have to realize that our voices need to be heard and we need to feel a sense of safety in order for our voices to be heard. And when it's not heard, we tend to probably shut down and we just don't speak up. So yeah, closed mouths don't get fed. Maybe a little bit of truth, but it's not the full story. Okay? The system is deciding who gets to speak, who is worth the conversation. So let's think about your last meeting and let me walk you through this quick reflection. Okay. So I want you to reflect on this. Okay. So the first thing I want you to reflect on is hierarchy. I want you to think about who was in the room, what levels of authority were represented in that room. Was it the most senior levels? Was it, what's it called? I can't even think. The entry level employees. Was it individual contributors? That's the word I'm looking for. Who was in that room? Was it only admins? Was it admin and a leader? Was it, all the people from a specific like part of the organization, like all finance, all marketing? What was the level of hierarchy? And then I want you to think who spoke first? Who spoke the longest? Really think about this. If you have a pen and paper, I want you to just take it down and I want you to think about this. Think about the hierarchy that's in the room. Again, when we do not become aware of the things that are happening, we can't fix it. The thing with hierarchy is that hierarchy determines who feels entitled to talk and who feels like they need permission. I know a lot of times, like even as a mom, it can be so easy for me to say to my children, like, I speak first and you listen. And to a degree, that's true, right? But it's not the full picture. And there's something to be said about modeling what good communication looks like, where we speak and we listen. Like, there's communication is not just about speaking, it's also about listening. And so when we set ourselves up in these organizations where it's like only the leader can speak up, you can't say anything. Or if I speak up and say something, there might be some consequences if that leader doesn't like what I say. We don't want to be like that. But I want you to notice what hierarchy is in your space. Okay? That's the first thing. The second thing is time scarcity. Was there time scarcity? How long was the meeting supposed to last? How much space did each person actually get to contribute? Did you actually give that person enough time to speak? Did you allow the introvert to come and say something after the fact and put in their opinion, even though you kind of moved on? Did you or did you not? When we see in data that the meetings are rushed, it's usually the loudest or the most senior voices that are talking the most. And then we have to rush. And so everybody else's opinion gets squeezed out because we're like, we just want to hear from the leader. And then somebody, again, closest to the work may have some other information. And we didn't allow them to say what they needed to say. So time scarcity. The third thing I want you to reflect on is psychological safety. I talked about this a little bit already, but did it feel like everyone could actually speak freely? Did it actually feel like that? Or did some people seem more hesitant? Maybe even kind of testing the waters, putting their toe in a little bit before saying something. So they might just be like, yeah, like they may agree just to see what the response will be. Or would they be encouraged to say more or not? These are the things that we need to ask ourselves. How psychologically safe is it? Does this person feel like they're going to be dismissed, or does this person feel like, tell me more? Like, what is that? And the last thing is structure. Is there a clear agenda? This one is so important. Is there a clear agenda? I want to know if I actually even need to come to this meeting. So what is the agenda? And then was someone facilitating? Was someone timekeeping? Was someone keeping notes? Or was it more of a free for all where whoever speaks the loudest, the longest, whoever says something that seems like based on their hierarchy or their importance, they get to speak and that ends up steering the conversation? What was the structure here? Think about it. So if you think back to it, hierarchy, time scarcity, psychological safety, structure, these are different measurements to ask yourself, are voices being are voices missing in these meetings? When you step back and you actually take a look at these four things, you start to see that silence is happening. And sometimes it's not up to the person to be silent. Sometimes our system is causing it. Sometimes. Sometimes the system makes it feel like speaking up is impossible and it's too risky, and it feels risky from a sense of maybe my own sense of safety may be at risk. Maybe I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe, I need to stay in my place and I shouldn't say anything about it. These are the type of things that happen in our system, and the voices just end up missing. They just end up missing. So, what should we do about it? What should we do about it? Tell me in the chat if you have ways that you think that we should encourage more speaking up, more diverse voices in our meetings. What should we be doing? Tell me, let me know. Here are 3 things that I have come up with that could be very tangible, but it can have such an impact on the group and individuals surrounding the group that I think it will be just great for you to try it out. So the first thing is I want you to design your meetings for inclusion. So don't make an assumption that everyone feels comfortable jumping in. Do not make that assumption. People are maybe having a hard day. There also may be things that have happened that people are just like, yeah, no, I'm not going to jump in on that. So, what you can do in this sense is you can start to use round robins. So, round robins is like you call on everybody, everyone gets to say something. The other thing that is just like a bright idea is to use sticky notes. Use sticky notes, especially if you're in public. This is the best way to get people to put their thoughts and put it on a board without having to necessarily speak it out loud. Okay. And so that helps, especially the people who are more quiet, introverted, who it may be risky because we don't necessarily know who wrote the stickies, but at least your voice is heard and that's brought into the session and you feel a sense of belonging. If you are virtual, you could use tools like Mural, Slack, things like that to gather input either before the meeting. You can gather it during the meeting using a whiteboard. There's all kinds of things that you could be doing to really get the voices heard because we want to make sure that everyone's voice is in the space, that everyone gets a chance to share their opinion, their ideas, their perspectives. We want that. That way, every voice gets some airtime, not just the quickest ones, not just the people who are quick on their feet. I am an Enneagram practitioner, and I use the Enneagram, which is a personality tool, to typically help teams or help individuals get to know themselves a lot better. Y'all, when I tell you the eights, the threes, the sevens, even sometimes, y'all gonna jump in. There's no type of like filter. You're just like, okay, here, this is what I think. Or maybe we should do this. And I always say like sevens are like my spirit animal. I'm not a seven, but I just love sevens. One, I'm a little biased because my husband is a seven, but I love sevens because they just have that spontaneity and they're just thinkers and they're the squirrels of the Enneagram. That's what I call them. But I also love my eights. Like my eights do something for me that just give me a lot of courage and just like, oh, let me just jump in, right? And so I like those voices in meetings. I love it. And give me some space to get my thoughts together. Give me some space. So that is, we really want to design for inclusion. And so don't just have a meeting and just have like, okay, this is my meeting, this is the agenda, and that's all. Really think about how do I get all voices talking? What different activities? How do I get people really bought in on doing things? I've been doing some coaching, some team coaching the last year with the team. And one of the things in my reflections is like, there could have been more to really bring out some of the more quieter voices. And it all came to like improv and putting activities with the sticky notes and being more intentional about role play and being more intentional about pairing people up because I think as facilitators, we default to kind of like facilitating the meeting, but it's not our meeting. It's their meeting. It's the team's meeting. And we want them to actually kind of embody the process and learn from you. And so it's important that inclusive spaces are important from starting from the agenda all the way throughout to the end, even afterwards. And so design for inclusion, that is the first thing. The second thing is rotate facilitation. It doesn't always have to be the same person facilitating. I remember when I worked at my last coaching team internally, and like it was so amazing to have different bodies facilitating different like retreats that we had every quarter and things like that because I learned so much. I learned so much from the different ways of how I can approach meetings. And y'all, when I say I got a toolbox of ways to facilitate meetings, I want you to try me because we're going to have some fun, right? But I just love like the different ways that I've learned how to facilitate. And the problem with like when we just have one person facilitate, and they're the same person every single time, it just is a static meeting, and it always put that person as like the power person, the person who's in authority, the person who is always the one that we listen to, and maybe they're the ones that know the answer. And so it doesn't allow for other people to kind of like feel like they can communicate different ways of being in the meeting, especially my senior managers. I want my upper to senior managers, let your people facilitate some meetings sometimes. Maybe you have an idea of what you absolutely need to talk about, but allow someone else to facilitate. When you rotate facilitators, even with this within the same team, it's going to shift the dynamics. You're going to start seeing people like do something different, and that's going to be very helpful. You're also going to see how empowered people feel, because now they feel like, oh, I own this. And now you actually also, when you rotate facilitation, you keep the attention. You definitely keep the attention of everybody in the room, because they're looking like, oh, how is this person going to do this, right? And it just reminds everybody that leadership is shared. This is a collective leadership team. We're all in this together. And then the last thing I want you to do is name and normalize the power. If there's a meeting happen, I want you to be able to say, hey, I'm hearing only from this side of the room, or I'm only hearing these people. I want to open it up so we can hear other voices that haven't had the chance to speak yet. Can we hear some other voices? Can we hear some other people share their opinions? We want to open it up, especially open it up before we move on, because there are some people that is like, oh yeah, I'm not going to talk. But once they get a little bit of permission, even a just a step forward, they are going to talk. It's not about calling people out. It's about calling the voices in to be with you, to actually share in the way that's going to make sense for you and your team. Okay. So, in closing, when we don't design for inclusion, we default to exclusion. We just default to that, and it's natural. And sometimes we don't even know it's happening, and that's just the way it is, right? And so we want to make sure that we literally pull people in to feel like they're included in these different meetings. The truth is, most teams don't mean to silence people, but silence becomes a symptom of the system. So remember, a couple of days ago when I talked in another live, I talked about, is it a systems problem or is it a symptom? And when it's a symptom problem, what happens is we see what's on top of the iceberg. So think about the icebergs, things under the waterline, things on top. We always see what's on top. That's the symptoms. We see the people quiet. We see people not sharing their opinions, their ideas. But what we don't see under the system is that there was no agenda. Only one person is facilitating. We're not designing so people can speak. We're not using sticky notes or different methods to get the voices in the room. This becomes a sign of the system. And when voices go missing and no one hears it, teams lose more than participation. They're losing perspective, they're losing innovation, they're losing trust. And we literally cannot thrive in a system when the people inside it don't feel seen or heard. If they don't feel seen or heard, they're out. They're like, bye, deuces. We're leaving. See you later. And then you lose a lot of the knowledge that you had. You waste a lot of money on training that was necessary. And now you're like, oh, we got to retrain. I don't know if you guys know, and I'll have to find the data on this, but it costs so much more to actually rehire than to actually like kind of like keep the people that you have. So just as a thought, we need to do more to keep the people that we have, but I'll find that data. And just knowing that when we center voices, we're not just talking about equity or fairness. We're really talking about how do we bring the full intelligence of the system into this space so we all learn from each other. Because when everyone has a space to contribute, the quality of even your decisions are better. Remember, I said if we don't get the people closest to the work in the meetings, you're missing out on key information that probably needs to be talked about and to be shared. Okay. You, when you do get these people, you're going to catch the risk a lot sooner. You're going to be able to be creative and start to move things forward faster. And this is one of the most important things. You build a culture where people want to stay with your organization, stay with your team. The same people leave bosses, they don't leave organizations. So if you are, or they leave leaders, bad leaders, not the organization. If you are somebody who they don't see as somebody who has provided the psychological safety or the sense of belonging, they're going to leave, and we don't want cultures like that. So in today, I want you to start reflecting on your meetings this week. And in your next meeting, notice who isn't talking. Ask yourself, what about our structure might be making it harder for them to speak? And then make one small change. Maybe it's a prompt at the beginning. Maybe it's a rotating facilitation. Maybe it's like, let's pause and let's give time to reflect on that. Write your thoughts down and then jump back in after so we can invite voices in. Because as an introvert, as myself, like sometimes I just need time, like, okay, can we pause for a second? Let's not move forward. Can we get some reflection time? Let me think, and then we'll move on. That's helpful for me if time permits. Because what we want to prevent is just like this chaos of not feeling belonged again, of having voices silenced when we really don't mean to. Okay, we want to prevent that. Teams don't get better by just talking louder and having the same voices in the room all the time. They get better by listening to all the voices and having all the voices. And when every voice has a place, then your system starts to work. Then you see a system that's actually thriving and doing the best that it can doing the best that it can and being the best that it can be. Okay. So do that as an exercise for yourself. Reflect on that this week. Who isn't talking? What structure you need to put in place because it might be harder for them to speak, and then make one small change. I'll see you again tomorrow. Tomorrow, what are we talking about? We are going to talk about how to move from being a gatekeeper to being open books, to having transparency, right? And redesigning how information flows in and out, because too many of us are operating in these scarce environments and we're hoarding information and the system is stuck. The toilet is clogged. Okay. So see you tomorrow. Talk to you soon. Bye.